Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a powerful, kind of invisible shield that guards your most personal data in the cloud. It's a global standard that most people have never even heard of. So, let's dive right in. I mean, really think about that for a second. Every single time you save something to the cloud, you're placing your trust in someone else to handle it. But who exactly is on the hook for keeping it safe and private? It's a question we should all be asking, for sure.
And listen, we're not talking about some random spreadsheet here. We're talking about the deeply personal stuff. All your photos, your cherished memories, family, vacations, all those moments you absolutely want to protect. Or what about your emails? Come on. That contains those private conversations, those sensitive attachments. It's basically a map of your entire personal and professional life.
And then you've got your documents, things like contracts, resumes, personal notes. I mean, our digital lives are literally built on services we trust will keep our information secure. But as we all know, hope is not a security strategy. So yeah, all of this stuff, it points to a really big issue, the urgent need for real, meaningful privacy in the cloud. It's not just a nice-to-have feature anymore. It's absolutely critical, especially with so much of our lives now stored online.
Look, any company can slap "We value your privacy" on their website. We've all seen it. But how do you actually know they mean it? A promise isn't proof. To really, truly trust a service with our most sensitive info, we need more than just words. We need a verifiable system. Okay, so how do we get from those vague promises to processes that are proven and reliable? This is where the whole idea of a formal, structured system for trust comes into play.
And that system actually has a name. It's called a Privacy Management System, or PMS for short. And this isn't just some empty corporate buzzword. It's a concrete framework of policies and controls. You can think of it as the official rulebook a cloud provider has to follow to protect your data.
A great way to think about this is like a recipe for privacy. Seriously. First, you identify your ingredients. You have to know exactly what personal data is being stored. Second, you set the rules. That's the recipe itself, how the data gets handled. Third, you implement safeguards. That's the actual cooking process. And finally, you audit and improve. You taste test the system, make sure it's working, and find ways to make it even better.
All right, so a privacy management system is the what? It's the concept. But how do you know if a company's system is any good? Well, that brings us to the hero of our story today, ISO 27018. This is the global standard that defines what a good system actually looks like.
Its full name is a bit of a mouthful. ISO-IEC 27018. But it's basically the internationally agreed-upon blueprint for protecting personal information in the public cloud. At the end of the day, this is the gold standard.
So what does this standard actually do for you? Well, it all comes down to your rights. First, there's consent and choice. That means you are in the driver's seat. You get to control how your data is used. Second is purpose limitation. This is huge. They can't just take your data and use it for advertising without your explicit permission. It also requires transparency, so you have the right to know where your data is being stored and who's handling it. And of course, there's security. Strong, robust measures have to be in place to prevent data breaches.
Okay, so let's talk about why this is so much more than just a piece of paper with some rules on it. Let's look at the real-world impact that a standard like this actually has.
This right here really shows you the difference. On the left, you've got a service without the standard. It's just a mess of vague promises, unclear data handling, and you have very limited control. But on the right, with an ISO 27018 certified service, you get a verifiable system where your consent is king. It's the difference between just hoping for the best and actually having a solid framework for protection.
For the cloud providers themselves, this standard is basically a toolkit. It gives them a clear guide to implement best practices right from the start. It provides a system to manage information security continuously. And, this is key, it creates a framework to audit their own processes, which is how they can prove to you that they're actually doing what they promised.
And this quote just sums it up perfectly. The goal isn't just to create rules for the sake of rules, it's to equip providers with the expert knowledge and practical skills they need to truly protect data. It's all about enabling real, measurable security.
And what makes this so powerful is that it's one single global standard. This creates a universal benchmark for trust. It doesn't matter if your cloud provider is down the street or on the other side of the planet. You can look for this one certification. So, all this leaves us with one final, and I think crucial question. The next time you sign up for a cloud service, just ask yourself, Is this provider certified to the ISO 2708 standard? Because knowing the answer to that, well, that's a powerful first step in taking back control of your digital life. Thanks for joining this explainer.
Let's be real. So much of our life happens in the cloud. But what's actually protecting that life? Today, we're diving into cloud privacy and the one international standard that's basically its invisible shield, ISO 27018. Seriously, take a second and think about it. Your photos, your private messages, your work files, chances are they're all sitting on servers in the public cloud. We lean on these services every single day. But how can we be sure our personal info is actually being protected? That's the billion-dollar question we're tackling. So first up, let's talk about this urgent need for privacy. And believe me, it's more urgent than ever. Look, privacy in the cloud isn't just a nice idea anymore. It's an absolute imperative. With our lives running on these public cloud services, handling our data responsibly isn't just some optional feature. It's the bedrock of trust and security online. And you've got to understand, the challenge of protecting data for billions of people is just massive. You can't just wing it. The only way you can possibly tackle a problem this big is with a dedicated, organized, and, yes, systematic approach. So what does a system that's actually built for privacy look like? Well, it's all about having a solid professional framework. And that framework has a name, a Privacy Management System, or PMS. Now, it's super important to note this isn't just some app you install. A PMS is the whole shebang. It's a complete set of policies, day-to-day procedures, and specific controls, all working together for one single purpose: to manage and protect our personal data reliably and all the time. Okay, so if a PMS is the framework we need to build, where do we get the blueprint? Well, that's where this specific international standard comes in. It's the official guide. And that blueprint is called ISO-IEC 27018. You can think of it as the gold standard, the official rulebook that public cloud providers need to follow to build their privacy systems. And this isn't just a list of suggestions. It is recognized all over the world as the authoritative way to do this right. So here's the key thing. This standard provides the full set of rules. The requirements are the things a cloud provider must do, no exceptions. And the controls are the specific tools and methods they have to put in place to meet those requirements. It's incredibly detailed, leaving no stone unturned. But the philosophy behind it is what's really powerful. It's not just about tech specs. It forces companies to set clear privacy goals. It makes them define exactly who is responsible for what. It demands transparency, so you, the data subject, know what's going on. It mandates tough security to keep your data safe. And maybe most important of all, it guarantees that your data can only be used exactly how you tell them to use it, period. Okay, so having a standard is one thing, but how do you take it off the page and make it work in the real, messy world? Well, that takes a very particular set of skills. Yeah, you can't just read the document and call it a day. To actually implement this standard effectively, you need professionals with deep expert knowledge, the book smarts, combined with practical, hands-on skills to apply it inside these massive, complex cloud systems. And this is pretty much what that professional journey looks like. It all starts with mastering the standard itself, inside and out. Then, it's about getting your hands dirty, gaining the practical skills to actually build and manage these privacy systems. And finally, you get to the crucial step: auditing and verifying that everything is actually working the way it's supposed to. Because that's the ultimate goal, right? It's being able to do those three things: implement, manage, and audit a system built specifically for privacy. It's not a one-and-done setup. It's a continuous cycle of vigilance and protection. So let's step back for a second and bring this all together. Why does some technical standard with a bunch of numbers in its name actually matter to us, the people who just want to use our favorite apps? It all boils down to one word: trust. When a cloud provider commits to a global standard like ISO 27018, they're giving us a concrete, verifiable reason to trust them with our data. Standards like this are what hold our digital world together. They're the foundation of trust. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. The next time you sign up for a new service or save a personal file to the cloud, just ask, do I know if this service meets the standard? Because asking that question is the first step toward really taking control of your own digital privacy. Every single day, we're trusting the cloud with pretty much everything. Our most precious memories, our important documents, even our private conversations. But behind that simple little click, there's this whole complex world of rules, all designed to protect our digital lives. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the one global standard that really, really matters for cloud privacy. I mean, really think about it for a second. You tap Save to Cloud on a photo, a document, whatever, and poof, it just disappears, right? Safely stored somewhere. But where does it actually go? Who has access to it? And, maybe most importantly, what rules are they playing by? It's a question most of us just never think to ask, but the answer is absolutely critical. And you know what? That answer is becoming more and more important every single day. As we move more and more of our lives online, the gap between how much we rely on these services and how certain we are that our personal info is safe, well, that gap just keeps getting wider. This isn't just about a preference anymore. There's a truly urgent need for a clear, reliable way to protect our data. So, how do we bridge that gap? How do we build that trust? Well, the answer lies in a global standard with a, let's be honest, a very official-sounding name, ISO 27018. Now, it might sound super technical, but trust me, understanding what this is the key to knowing how your privacy is really being protected out there in the cloud. Okay, so what is this thing exactly? To put it simply, ISO 27018 is basically an international agreement on how to protect your personally identifiable information, or PII, when it's in the cloud. And PII is, well, it's anything that can identify you. We're talking your name, your email, your photos, even your location. This standard is the official rulebook for any public cloud service that handles this kind of personal data. Now, it's really important to make a key distinction here, one that people mix up all the time: the difference between privacy and security. Think of it like this. Cloud security, that's like the giant reinforced wall around the entire system. It's there to protect it from outside threats like hackers. But cloud privacy, which is our focus today, that's the set of rules about what the company itself can't do with your personal data once it's inside that wall. See the difference? All right, so we know this standard exists to protect our data, but how does it actually work? I mean, what is it? At its core, it's not a piece of software or anything like that. It's a framework, a kind of guiding philosophy for building trust. Honestly, the best way to think about this is to imagine a building code for a house. A building code doesn't actually build the house, right? But it makes sure the house has a strong foundation, that the wiring is safe, all that stuff. In the exact same way, ISO 27018 provides the essential rules and requirements to make sure the digital house where your information lives is safe and secure. So the crucial takeaway here is that this framework is a complete toolkit. It's not just a suggestion. For starters, it's designed specifically for the public cloud services we use every day. It's got a full set of requirements, like a really detailed checklist for companies. It provides the exact privacy controls they need to have in place, and it doesn't just guide them on how to build this stuff, but also how to prove it's working through independent audits. So, if the ISO 27018 framework is the blueprint, what's the actual house that gets built from it? Let's take a look at how all these rules come together to form a real, functioning system. And this is it. It's called a Privacy Management System, or PMS for short. This is the real-world, tangible result of putting that framework into action. It's the living, breathing operation inside a cloud company, that whole mix of policies, procedures, and tech that is actively managing and protecting your personal data, all based on that one global blueprint. And creating one of these systems isn't a one-and-done kind of deal. Not at all. It's a continuous cycle. First, a company has to actually implement all the controls from the standard. Then they have to manage that system, every single day. And finally, and this is the part that really creates accountability, they have to get audited by an independent expert to prove, to verify that the system is working exactly the way it's supposed to. Okay, we've talked about standards, frameworks, and management systems, a lot of technical stuff. But let's bring it all back home. Why does any of this actually matter to you when you're just trying to save a family photo or an important file? Well, because it all comes down to one really powerful idea: having a universal benchmark for trust. When you have a single global standard, it just removes all the confusion. It means that whether your cloud provider is in California or Germany or Japan, there's a clear, unified expectation for how your personal data must be treated. And that, ultimately, is the real takeaway here. This standard creates a common language, so when a cloud provider tells you they are ISO 27018 compliant, they're speaking this language. They're making a clear, verifiable promise about how they will handle your information. It transforms trust from just a vague feeling into something that's actually measurable and accountable. And so that leaves us with one final kind of empowering question. We know now that this gold standard for cloud privacy exists. We know it provides the blueprint for building a safe digital home for our data. So the only question left to ask is your cloud provider using it? Something to think about the next time you click Save.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a question that honestly affects every single one of us. When you put your data in the cloud, who's actually in charge of keeping it safe? The answer? Well, it's probably not what you think. So let's dive in.
So let's just start with the biggest question, the one that's on everybody's mind. You're using cloud services all day, every day. I mean, for everything from your family photos to super sensitive work documents. But is any of that stuff truly safe? It seems like a simple question, but the answer is anything but. To really get a handle on the risk, you first have to understand what the prize is. See, in our modern economy, data isn't just data. It's a full-blown asset. In fact, for some of the biggest companies in the world, your personal information is literally the most valuable thing they have. It really is the new gold.
And there's an official term for this gold. It's called personally identifiable information, or PII for short. And this is any little piece of data that can be traced back to you. We're talking the obvious stuff, your name, your social security number, but also your email, your home address, even your computer's IP address.
And this is where everything changes. This incredibly valuable asset, all of your PII, it doesn't live in a locked filing cabinet anymore. It's not on some dusty old server in a back room. For the most part, it lives in the cloud. And, well, putting that much gold all in one place, that's created some huge new challenges.
Because here's the thing, when security fails in the cloud, it doesn't fail small. The scale is just enormous, and the consequences can be absolutely devastating. Not just for the company, but for the millions of people whose private information is suddenly out there for the world to see.
And you want to know the scariest part? It doesn't always take some super sophisticated cyber attack from a team of genius hackers. No. Sometimes all it takes is one simple mistake. A single little oversight.
100 million. Just let that number sink in. That's how many customer records were exposed in the huge Capital One data breach back in 2019. 100 million people, their personal info just suddenly vulnerable, all because of one single mistake.
So what was that one mistake? Well, it wasn't that Amazon's cloud itself got hacked. Nope. The problem was a misconfigured web application firewall on Capital One's side of things. They basically just left a digital door unlocked. It's the perfect and frankly terrifying example of how the tools can be secure, but it's how you use those tools that really matters.
Now, breaches like this, they set off alarm bells all over the world. Governments and regulators decided they just couldn't sit back and let this happen. So they responded with what you can only really call a regulatory tsunami, creating a brand new rulebook for data privacy. Two of the biggest waves in that tsunami are Europe's GDPR and California's CCPA and CPRA. And they kind of tackle the problem from different angles. You see, GDPR is all about forcing companies to build privacy into their systems from the very beginning. CCPA, on the other hand, is more focused on giving you, the consumer, specific rights, like the right to tell a company, hey, you're not allowed to sell my information. And listen, these aren't just polite suggestions. These laws have some very, very sharp teeth. If you violate them, you can get hit with fines so big they can cripple even the biggest companies on the planet.
Just look at this. In 2023, Meta got hit with a record-breaking 1.2 billion euro fine. A billion. But here's the craziest part. It wasn't even for a data breach. It was for inadequate data transfer mechanisms. In other words, just for moving data between the EU and the US in a way that regulators said wasn't safe enough. The cost of getting this stuff wrong is absolutely staggering.
Okay, so we've seen the risks, we've seen the rules, and all this brings us right back to our main question. With so much at stake, when something goes wrong, who's actually mining the data? Who's on the hook for it? Let's unpack this puzzle.
The answer, and this is so important, lies in a concept called the shared responsibility model. This is the framework that basically every major cloud provider on Earth uses, and it's designed to make it crystal clear who is responsible for what.
This model isn't about passing the buck or pointing fingers. It's about creating a blueprint for accountability, where both the cloud provider and the customer have very specific, very critical roles to play.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. The cloud provider, your Amazons, Googles, Microsofts, they are responsible for the security of the cloud. That means the physical buildings, the servers, the core network. Think of them like a landlord who makes sure the entire apartment building is secure. But you, the customer, you're responsible for security in the cloud. That's your data, your apps, and this is the big one, your configurations. The landlord secures the building, but you still have to lock your own apartment door.
So what does that actually mean for you? It means you have to configure your cloud services correctly. Remember Capital One? That was a failure right here. It means you have to manage who gets access to your data. It means making sure you're handling all that PII legally. The provider gives you a secure building. It's up to you to run a secure apartment inside of it. So if you take away one thing from all of this, let it be this. Protecting data in the cloud is not one company's job. It is a partnership, a deep, fundamental partnership between you and your cloud provider. And if either side drops the ball, the whole thing can fall apart.
And that really leaves us with one last thought. We know now that the cloud is a partnership. So it's worth asking yourself, do you really understand your role in that partnership? And are you holding up your end of the bargain? Thanks for digging into this with us.
All right, let's dive right into a topic that honestly affects pretty much all of us in this digital world. What in the world is a privacy management system? Let's get to it. But first, let me ask you something. Just take a second and think about it. Where is your personal data right now? I mean, sure, it's on your phone, but it's also sitting with your email provider, all your social media apps, your cloud photo storage, every online store you've ever used. It is, well, it's everywhere. And that really gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? Most of that data lives out there in the public cloud, and because of that, there's this really urgent need to protect it. Without some kind of structured system in place, all that information is just vulnerable to data breaches, misuse. It's a huge risk for the companies holding it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll unpack that urgent need for privacy. Then we're going to define what this management system actually is. After that, we'll look at the engine that keeps it improving. We'll use a really simple analogy to make it all click. And finally, we'll talk about why this whole thing really, truly matters. So let's start with the big picture, the urgent need for privacy. Look, with so many companies using public cloud services to store our data, just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, that is not a strategy. We need a formal, organized way to keep all that info safe. And thankfully, there is an official global response to this whole problem. It's a specific standard called ISO-IEC 2718. You can just think of it as the international rulebook, right? It's the framework that tells companies exactly how to protect personal data in the public cloud. It's basically the blueprint for the very system we're talking about. Okay, so that standard is the blueprint. But what kind of system does it actually build? Well, that brings us right to our main question. What exactly is a privacy management system, or as you'll often hear it, a PMS? So here we go. This is the official definition. A privacy management system is a system of processes, policies, people, and technologies. Now, the key phrase here is work in concert. They all have to work together cohesively to do two main things. First, manage privacy risk, and second, prove that they're actually following the rules. And you can really break this down into 4 essential pillars. See, a strong privacy system isn't just about some fancy software. It needs well-defined processes, crystal clear written policies, trained people who actually know what they're doing, and then finally, the right technology to back it all up. You gotta have all 4. Take one away and the whole thing gets wobbly. But here's something that's absolutely crucial. This is not a set it and forget it kind of deal. Not at all. Privacy threats are changing all the time, so the system protecting us has to change too. And that brings us to the engine that keeps it running, this idea of continuous improvement. Let's see how it actually stays effective. The engine driving all this is something called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It's a constant loop. It's pretty simple, really. First, you plan your privacy goals. Then, you do it. You actually put the plan into action. Next, you check your work. You monitor how everything's going. And here's the most important part. You act on what you've learned to make the system even stronger. And then, the cycle starts all over again. Now, I know this can all sound a little bit abstract with all the talk of systems and cycles, so to make it way more concrete, let's use a simple analogy. Just think about building a really secure building. This is such a great way to get it. Think of a general information security management system, an ISMS, as the entire secure building. We're talking the foundation, the walls, the roof. It protects everything inside. Now, the privacy management system, or PMS, it isn't the building itself. Nope. It's the very specific set of rules for the confidential files you keep inside that building. It's what says who can look at them, how they have to be stored, and exactly when they must be shredded. So one system secures the whole building, while the other protects the super sensitive private info that's inside. So after all that, let's bring it all home. Why does any of this actually matter? Let's go over the crucial takeaways, whether you're a privacy professional or just, a person who uses the internet. So what's the bottom line? A PMS matters because it's a formal system for managing privacy risk. It gives us that critical framework for public cloud services. It lets a company prove it's following the rules, it's built to always get better, and ultimately it is absolutely essential for protecting our personal data. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Mastery of the ISO 27018 framework is essential for responding to the urgent need for cloud privacy. For any company today, this isn't just a nice little extra, it's a critical, necessary response to the privacy challenges we all face. And I'll just leave you with this final important thought. We now know that good organizations use these systems to protect our data. But how can you, as a consumer, ever really be sure it's working? Something to think about. All right, let's dive right in. Look, if you use the internet, you're using the cloud. Simple as that. Whether you're sending an email, streaming a show, or storing your photos, it's all happening in the cloud. But as more and more of our lives go digital, we have to face this massive, super urgent question about the privacy of our most personal information. And that really brings us to one of the biggest questions of our time. Seriously, is it? I mean, this is the question that's right at the heart of our digital lives. We trust so many companies with our data every single day, but should we? In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why this question has become one of the most important ones of the 21st century. So, to really get a handle on the risk, you first have to understand the value. We've basically entered a whole new economy, a data economy, where the currency isn't just money anymore. It's information. Your information, specifically what's called PII, or Personally Identifiable Information, which is now, believe it or not, one of the world's most critical assets. And what is PII exactly? Well, it's pretty much anything that can be used to identify you as an individual. We're talking your name, your address, your social security number, even your financial history. And with this huge shift to cloud computing, this incredibly valuable asset isn't just locked away in some filing cabinet anymore. Oh no, it's spread out across these vast digital networks, creating a brand new and unbelievably high-stakes economy. Okay, so whenever you have an asset that's this valuable, and it's stored basically everywhere, it's going to become a target. And when those digital walls that are supposed to be protecting that asset come crumbling down, the consequences can be, well, they can be absolutely catastrophic. So let's take a look at what happens when that trust gets broken. This right here is the number one threat we're talking about, a cloud data breach. It might sound a bit technical, but the idea behind it is brutally simple. It's someone getting into a digital space where they are not supposed to be and walking out with a ton of sensitive information. And trust me, this is not just some theoretical problem. It happens, and on a scale that is just mind-boggling. 100 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. In 2019, the personal records of over 100 million Capital One customers were exposed in a massive data breach. This wasn't a small leak. This was a digital flood that put millions and millions of people at serious risk. So the question is, how on earth did this even happen? And this is what's so wild. It wasn't some crazy, super complex cyber attack from a spy movie that brought down their defenses. Nope, it was a simple, totally preventable mistake. A web application firewall was just configured improperly. Think of it like this. They left the front door to the bank vault unlocked. And that single failure, that one mistake in their cloud security setup, opened the door for an absolute disaster. Now, incidents like the Capital One breach sent massive shockwaves all around the world. And it really forced governments to step up and do something. They just couldn't ignore this data privacy crisis anymore. And that led to what a lot of people are now calling a regulatory tsunami, this huge, powerful wave of new laws, all designed to protect our data. And there are two big ones that are really setting the standard for the whole world. Over in Europe, you've got GDPR. The key thing here is its extraterritorial reach, which is a fancy way of saying its rules can apply to companies all over the globe, not just in the EU. Then in the US, you've got California's laws, the CCPA and CPRA. Their focus is a little different. It's more about giving you, the consumer, power and control over your data, like the right to delete it or stop companies from selling it. And you better believe these regulations have some serious teeth. I mean, just look at this. Regulators hit Meta, Facebook's parent company, with a jaw-dropping 1.2 billion euro fine for breaking GDPR's data transfer rules. So yeah, these aren't just polite suggestions. These are laws with massive, massive financial consequences. So we've got incredibly valuable data, huge risks, and powerful new rules. All of this brings us to one of the most fundamental questions in all of this. When you use a cloud service, who is actually responsible for keeping your information safe? Is it the cloud company itself, like an Amazon or a Google? Or is it the company you're doing business with, like Capital One in our example? Well, the answer lies in this really important framework called the shared responsibility model. This is basically the industry's rulebook for figuring out who is on the hook for what. It's designed to make sure there are no gaps in security and that everybody knows exactly what their job is. And this table just breaks it down perfectly. You have to think about it in two parts. On one side, you have the cloud provider, your Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. They're what's called the PII processor, and they're responsible for the security of the cloud. That means the physical buildings, the servers, the network, the actual infrastructure. But then you have their customer, the PII controller. They're responsible for security in the cloud. That's everything they put on that infrastructure, managing who has access, configuring their tools, encrypting their data. Probably the easiest way to think about this whole thing is like a partnership. The cloud provider builds this incredibly secure foundation, right, like a fortress with strong walls and guards. But the customer, they're the ones who build their house inside that fortress, so they're still responsible for locking their own doors and windows. That misconfigured firewall at Capital One, that was the customer leaving their front door wide open. It was a failure of security in the cloud. And that brings us right back to where we started. The playbook for who's responsible is clear. The laws are now in place. The stakes have honestly never been higher. But knowing the rules is one thing. Actually executing them perfectly every single day is something else entirely. And that leaves us with one final and really critical question to think about.